In Chile, police forces repressed demonstrations in commemoration of the victims of the coup d'etat against Salvador Allende in 1973. In Europe, authorities alert that the available gas reserves could be insufficient to face the coming winter. And in Syria, the government continues to denounce the looting of crude oil by the United States military forces. This Sunday, another 88 tanker trucks crossed the border to Iraq. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Chile, police forces repressed demonstrations in commemoration of Salvador Allende's 1973 coup d'etat victims. During the massive concentration, Chilean carabineros have been severely repressing demonstrators and civilians in the area with water trucks and tear gas. This event takes place in the context of a new mobilization day of students who are demanding dignified conditions for their return to classes. So far, several people continue recording how the police throw jets of water and tear gas against the students while young people struggle to remain in the streets.
Hello, I am Victoria Herrera, national spokeswoman for Ucamau. Here we are, the movement of settlers, the guerrillas of Ucamau. Here we are again participating in the pilgrimage, remembering our history, remembering those who died fighting in our country and who raised a struggle of the workers' movement. We continue with a vindicating struggle for us, which is the right to housing and citizenship, remembering that movement that was raised during a historical process for our country. So we will continue marching every year in this pilgrimage, and we will continue to vindicate those rights denied to the workers.
Also in Chile, people denounced that private mining companies pay lower taxes compared to the state-owned National Copper Corporation of Chile, also known as Codelco. According to the Center for National Studies of Alternative Development, in a year private mining companies took 71% of the copper extracted in Chile without paying a significant amount and whose total worth reached more than $38 billion US. In this regard, they warned taxes rendered by private mining companies accounted for 0.5% of fiscal income, while Codelco, which extracts close to 30% of the nation's minerals, contributes with 7.6%. That is nearly $6,000 million. In Ecuador, 2 men were rescued from a collapsed mine in Azuay province where they had been trapped for 3 days. The National Risk and Emergency Management Service confirmed the rescue of both miners, aged 46 and 55, and stated that both got out of the mine on their own and without serious injuries. The rescue efforts included personnel from the local fire department, the National Risk and Emergency Management Service, and the National Police. Authorities arrived at the scene after a call to the emergency hotline on Thursday. The government of Venezuela reported a new attack on its electricity system in the state of Falcón, west of the country, and informed that after a brief interruption, the service has been re-established. The Minister of Electric Energy, Néstor Reverol, declared that it was a sabotage to the Josefa Camejo thermoelectric power plant in the city of Punto Fijo. 2 people suspected of having perpetrated the attack were detained and remain under medical attention after suffering burns during the events. Additionally, it was learned that the action caused damage to 3 turbines of the plant, which caused a temporary interruption of the service in the region. For the first time in its 38-year history, Brazil's landless workers' movement is fielding candidates in the state and national congressional elections. In Pernambuco, our correspondent Brian Meir has more.
This year, for the first time in its 38-year history, Brazil's largest working-class social movement, the Landless Workers Movement, or MST, is fielding candidates across the country in state and federal elections.
We have to defeat fascism and the far right, which is taking over the Brazilian state. So we have to do everything we can to guarantee a great national mobilization to elect Lula. But we also have to elect state and federal lawmakers that can support Lula to govern in accordance with the needs that this moment demands. This is why the MST's institutional participation in these elections is so important.
In the northeastern state of Pernambuco, where the MST has occupied and transformed unproductive land into productive farms for 100,000 families, The movement is fielding a candidate for state congress, and other social movements have joined the campaign in solidarity.
These elections are fundamental for young people too. Youth are more and more involved in the electoral process. We have to choose between barbarism and hope, so we are supporting the candidates from MST.
With over 1.5 million members nationwide, this October's elections will represent an important test of the MST's ability to occupy political power.
The role of Parliament is to institutionalize the struggles taking place on the streets, the demands and the power of the streets. This is why the MST is interested in occupying space within the institutions.
Brian Mir, TeleSUR, Recife.
Supporters of Argentinian Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner rallied after the politician survived an assassination attempt. Tens of thousands of Argentinians take to the streets after the shooting attempt. The former president was mingling with supporters outside her home last Thursday night when a gun brandished by alleged shooter Fernando Sabac Montiel failed to fire. The man accused of trying to shoot Argentinian Vice President Cristina Fernández last week planned the attack with his girlfriend, according to preliminary charges filed by a judge, local media reported Wednesday. The charges seen by media Wednesday are preliminary and can still be modified, but they mark the first official charge that the attack on the vice president was premeditated.
We saw that they tried to condemn Cristina and even wanted to put her in jail. But we fell short. We fell short with that concern because on September 1st, a group not only wanted to see her imprisoned or condemned, but they wanted to see her dead. And that is a point that we are not going to allow. They will not pass.
In the United States, a study on criminal violence revealed that homicides increased by 50% during the first half of this year. According to a survey released by Axios on Saturday, violent crime rose 4.2% during the period from January 1st to June 30th, compared to the same period last year. Although the figures show homicides decreased by 2.4% and rapes fell by 5% in major cities compared to 2019 mid-year figures, there was a 50% increase in homicides and a roughly 36% increase in aggravated assaults. Gun violence has been the driving force behind the rise in homicides. Most experts agree that it will take a combination of actions from law enforcement, policymakers, and community-based organizations for these numbers to return to pre-pandemic levels. Let us take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Europe, authorities forecast that available gas reserves could be insufficient to cope with the coming winter. The head of the Turkish company Gazday Energy Consulting, Mehmet Dogan, stated that despite the fact that gas deposits in Europe are close to 80% of their capacity, this figure will not be enough in case of an extremely cold winter. The leader of the firm added that despite the energy-saving measures announced by the European Union, the gas in tariffs will run out by the end of January. He also said that prices in the regions have gotten out of control due to the bloc's irresponsible policies, especially the suspension of the entry into operation of the new Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Swedes voted on Sunday in an election pitting the incumbent center-left Social Democrats against a right-wing bloc that has embraced the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats as it tries to win back power after 8 years in opposition. With steadily growing numbers of shootings on urban borders, campaigning has seen parties battle to be the toughest on gun crime, while surging inflation and the energy crisis in the wake of the special operation of Ukraine have increasingly taken center stage. Opinion polls show the center-left running neck and neck with the right-wing bloc and suggest the Sweden Democrats will be the second biggest party behind the Social Democrats, overtaking the conservative moderates. The Swedish parliament has 349 seats. Elections are held every 4 years.
I think it's concerning, especially because it's polarizing society in general, and I don't like the way that people can't really talk and listen to each other anymore, but everything is getting polarized, so I think it's just negative in terms of democracy and being able to talk openly.
And this Sunday, Queen Elizabeth II's flag-wrapped coffin left Balmoral Castle for the Scottish capital of Edinburgh. Thousands of silent mourners lined the streets to pay their respects to the late sovereign, with some throwing flowers as the cortege wound its way through the countryside. The Queen's coffin was travelling by road through Scottish towns and villages on the way to Edinburgh in a 290-kilometre journey. Farmers on the route positioned their tractors to form a guard of honor as the cortege drove by, while riders on horseback lined up in Pettercoulter, a suburb of Aberdeen, to pay respect. The Queen's state funeral will take place at Westminster Abbey on Monday, September 19th. The day has been declared a bank holiday across the UK. In the United Kingdom, a demonstration of the Black Lives Matter movement gathered on Saturday in front of Parliament to reject the murder of Chris Kaba by the Metropolitan Police. The 24-year-old was shot dead on Monday night in South London after being arrested in the middle of a police operation. The victim's mother led the mobilization, which was attended by an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 people. Demonstrators demanded the suspension of the policeman responsible for the murder and demanded greater protection for people of color. Meanwhile, the new Prime Minister Liz Truss asked demonstrators to respect their official mourning.
My grief is with the family of Chris Kaba, who was executed by the police, and we are here to voice our deep anger and protest about this killing. Sadly not unusual. Many black men have died in police custody, in prison custody, in psychiatric units. This isn't the first. Sadly, it won't be the last, because the Metropolitan Police is institutionally misogynist, homophobic and racist.
In Greece, public workers took to the streets of the capital on Saturday to reject the labor reform that worsens their working conditions. Greek policemen, firefighters and coast guards protested from the early hours of Saturday over low wages and unpaid extra hours. Such conditions derive from the labor reform pushed by Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis and approved by Parliament in June. The initiative localizes the 10-hour workday and separates working hours negotiation from the collective agreements. Around 1,000 anti-government protesters gathered in Croatia's capital Zagreb on Saturday in the wake of a major corruption scandal and amid the cost of living crisis. The protests attracted a mix of people who came to voice their grievances with the government, ranging from corruption and energy prices to the pending adoption of the euro set for January 2023, which many believe would push prices up even more. Other issues addressed include mass immigration, as Croatia has experienced an exodus of youth since joining the European Union in 2013, which led to an increase in labor shortages, and the government's handling of the COVID pandemic, which has so far claimed the lives of nearly 17,000 people. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A convoy of the United States occupation forces consisting of 88 tankers loaded with stolen oil from Syria left the country through Al-Mahmoudiyya crossing. According to local sources, the convoy left the Syrian territory and headed towards the U.S. bases in northern Iraq. This happened after U.S. forces last week also moved more than 300 tankers loaded with oil, as well as 100 armored vehicles carrying military equipment through Al-Walid illegal crossing, sometimes used for these operations. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the redeployment of troops from multiple locations across Ukraine's Kharkov region.
Russian troops that operate near Balakleya and Izum are to be redeployed for reinforcement at Donetsk direction in order to reach pre-established objectives of the special military operation. With this purpose, the Izum-Balakleya group of troops had been redeployed to the Donetsk People's Republic within 72 hours. Various deceptive and demonstrative maneuvers had been carried out, marking real action of the troops within the above-mentioned operation. The enemy had been under powerful fire attacks with the involvement of aviation, missile troops and artillery for preventing any damage to Russian troops. Over 2,000 Ukrainian and foreign militants, as well as more than 100 units of armored equipment and artillery have been eliminated within 72 hours.
Ukrainian local authorities refused to receive power from Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Kiev-controlled regions. According to Vladimir Rogov, a representative of the Zaporizhzhia military administration, the Ukrainian authorities have unilaterally stopped accepting power from the plant, despite the fact that the plant has the technical capacity to continue supplying it. According to Rogov, Ukraine does not accept electricity as a deliberate provocative measure aimed at disabling and stopping the plant's operation. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been under the military protection of the Russian forces since March, and Moscow assures that it maintains its presence at the facility to protect its physical integrity and prevent the leakage of the nuclear material. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the international community to assist Pakistan after devastating floods that have killed nearly 1,400 people so far.
The needs are enormous, and I urge massive and urgent financial support for Pakistan. And this is not just a question of solidarity or generosity, it is a question of justice. Pakistan is paying the price of something that was created by others.
The UN Secretary General also held wealthy countries morally responsible for helping developing countries, as they are responsible for 80% of today's emissions.
The G20 countries are responsible for 80% of today's emissions. 1%, 80%. And developed economies are responsible for the vast majority of greenhouse gases throughout history. Here, from Pakistan, I want to reinforce a clear point. Wealthier countries are morally responsible for helping developing countries like Pakistan to recover from disasters like this and to adapt, to build resilience to climate impacts that unfortunately will be repeated in the future.
TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on screen are in place since July 1st, and quite soon further change will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us, and our stories are heard in all the faraway nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and unfaithfulness to our audience. We have come to the end of this news brief, where you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram. And now you can also follow us on TikTok at the account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.